My parents spent $80,000 on my sister's dream wedding, then told me to go into debt for life-saving heart surgery. Now they're begging me for help. Everything started about 3 years ago, when I was 26 and got hit with a diagnosis I never saw coming: hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Basically, my heart muscle was thickening in a dangerous way, and without surgery, it was going to kill me. The cardiologist didn't sugarcoat anything. He told me I had maybe 6 weeks to get it handled, or I could literally drop dead at any moment from cardiac arrest. I remember sitting in his office, trying to keep it together while he explained how they'd need to cut away part of my heart muscle to keep me alive. The surgery was booked for October 15th, and even with insurance, the cost was still around $40,000. Apparently, this type of heart surgery wasn't fully covered, so I'd be stuck with a mountain of deductibles, copays, and a bunch of other fees I barely understood. But the bottom line was simple: I didn't have that kind of money lying around. I mean, who does at 26 when you're a graphic designer barely making enough to stay on top of rent, student loans, and basic living expenses? So I called my parents, because honestly, what else was I supposed to do? I explained the diagnosis, laid out the cost, and asked if they could help. It was life or death. My mom started crying, and then my dad got on the phone and said, "Of course we'll help, we'll figure it out." I remember this wave of relief washing over me, thinking, okay, they've got my back. My parents love me. I'm not going to die. But then 2 days later, my sister Jenna called, all bubbly and excited. She had just gotten engaged to her boyfriend Barry, some guy I'd only met a handful of times. He seemed alright, but that wasn't really the point. She starts going on and on about how they want a destination wedding in Hawaii this December because it's where they went on their first trip together. She's always dreamed of a beach wedding, apparently. I was happy for her, I guess. But in the back of my mind, I was counting the days until my heart surgery, only 5 weeks away. Then she mentions the wedding's going to cost around $60,000 and that she expects our parents to pay for most of it, just like they did for our older brother's wedding a couple years ago. She flat out said she wouldn't accept anything less than what he got. That's when I started to feel this uneasy pit in my stomach. But I told myself our parents had savings. They'd been teachers their whole lives, not rich, but they've worked for decades, own their home, and always seem to have enough for the important stuff. A week later, I went over for dinner like usual. I brought up the surgery again, because the hospital needed a deposit soon and I had no plan for how to pay. My dad's face got tight, and my mom wouldn't even look at me. That's when I knew something was off. Finally, my dad said they needed to talk to me about something, and I could already tell it wasn't going to be good. He started explaining how expensive Jenna's wedding was going to be. They'd already paid deposits for the venue, the catering, the photographer. It's Hawaii, so they're also covering flights and hotel rooms for our grandparents and our aunt and uncle, who couldn't afford to go otherwise. Altogether, they were looking at about $50,000 for the wedding, which was just 2 months after my scheduled surgery. I sat there doing the math in my head, thinking, so you've got $50,000 for a wedding, but not $40,000 to help me stay alive? My dad insisted it wasn't that simple. They'd already made commitments. People were counting on them. And Jenna had apparently been planning this wedding for years, despite only getting engaged like 2 weeks ago. But she's had a Pinterest board since she was 16, so I guess that counts. My mom finally chimed in, saying maybe I could delay the surgery until after the wedding, and then they could help me. I just stared at her. Did she not hear the doctor say I could literally die any day? Postponing 3 months wasn't just a delay, it was a death sentence. I told her that. And she shrugged and said maybe the doctor was being dramatic. Her dad had heart issues for years before he finally got treatment. I reminded her that her dad died of a heart attack at 58. She went quiet. Then my dad said maybe I could try getting a loan, or ask the hospital for a payment plan. I was getting furious. Why was I the one expected to go into debt to save my own life while they threw money at a one-day party? So I said exactly that. And apparently Jenna had been eavesdropping in the kitchen, because she suddenly burst in, screaming at me, accusing me of trying to sabotage her wedding. She said I'd always been jealous and now I was manipulating mom and dad with my sob story just to steal the spotlight. I lost it. I yelled back that I wasn't making anything up. I wasn't trying to ruin anything. I just didn't want to die. She kept going, yelling that I was being dramatic, that plenty of people live with heart problems and don't need surgery right away. She said I was doing this to make everything about me, as usual. And there we were. 2 sisters screaming at each other in our parents' house, one trying not to die and the other trying to have the perfect beach wedding, while our parents just sat there in silence. Eventually, my dad told us both to calm down and said they'd made their decision. They were paying for the wedding. They'd already promised Jenna, and backing out now wasn't an option. But they'd try to help me afterward if I could wait. I walked out. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. When I got home, I called my brother Aaron. I told him everything. He said he wished he could do more, but with a baby on the way and a new mortgage, he couldn't swing $40,000. He could maybe spare $5,000. I appreciated it, but it wasn't going to cut it. Time was running out, so I took out loans, maxed out credit cards, put myself into financial ruin just to get the surgery that would keep me alive. I had the procedure on October 15th, just like planned. It went well. The doctor said I'll be okay for now, but I'll need regular checkups and maybe more surgeries down the road. But at least I'm alive. If I'd waited until after Jenna's big beach moment, I might not be here. And here's the part that really stings: my parents didn't even come to the hospital. The day I had open heart surgery, they were off dealing with some wedding emergency, something about flowers or the music. They drove 3 hours to meet the planner. My mom texted me, "Good luck." That was it. Aaron came and sat with me. My best friend Sarah was there too. That was enough, I guess. But it still hurt like hell that my parents could drop everything to talk about flower arrangements, but not to be there when their kid was getting their chest cut open. The recovery sucked. I was out of work for 6 weeks. Missed rent 2 months in a row. I ended up crashing on my old college roommate's couch. My credit cards were shot. Debt collectors started calling. My life was basically crumbling, but hey, at least I was still breathing. Jenna's wedding happened that December. From what I heard, it was everything she dreamed of: beautiful, extravagant, the kind of event that gets a dedicated photo album on Facebook. My parents couldn't stop posting about it, bragging about their magical daughter's special day like they just pulled off a royal ceremony. I didn't go. I was still recovering from heart surgery, sure, but the real reason? I was too angry, too bitter, too raw to sit in the middle of that spectacle and pretend like everything was okay. It wasn't. But what really pushes me over the edge, what still makes my blood boil just thinking about it, is what happened about 6 months after their precious wedding. And I need to lay all of this out clearly, because it explains why I made the decision I did yesterday. My dad called me out of nowhere. His tone was off, nervous, like he was gearing up for something. I thought maybe they were finally going to acknowledge what happened, maybe even offer to help with the mountain of debt I was still carrying from the surgery. But no. When I went over to their place, they sat me down and told me they were in serious financial trouble. Like, might lose the house kind of trouble. I was stunned. Turns out, they didn't just spend $50,000 on Jenna's wedding, they blew through nearly $80,000. Jenna kept making changes, wanting upgrades, inviting more and more people. My parents paid for flights, hotel stays, everything. And to cover it all, they took out a loan against their home. Now they couldn't keep up with the payments, and the bank was closing in. Then my dad looked me in the eye and asked if I could help. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity was unreal. He got irritated, told me this wasn't a joke, they were about to lose everything. And I said, well, maybe you should have thought about that before choosing a wedding over your daughter's life. My mom burst into tears, accused me of being heartless. But I wasn't trying to be cruel, I was telling the truth. I told them that too. They made a choice back then. They prioritized a party over my survival. And now, with the consequences crashing down on them, they were looking at me to fix it? No. My dad tried to say it wasn't the same. That they didn't realize I actually needed the surgery right away. I just stared at him. The cardiologist had said I could die any day. What part of that hadn't sunk in? He had no answer. So yeah, they lost the house. About a year later, they were forced into a tiny apartment. My dad started doing food delivery to make ends meet. My mom picked up house cleaning gigs on weekends. Meanwhile, Jenna and Barry had already moved out of state for his job and were nowhere to be found while all this chaos unfolded, chaos they helped create. I'd be lying if I said I never felt bad. Watching your parents struggle is hard. They're getting older, and life's beating them up. But part of me also thought, this is the bed they made. Now they get to lie in it. I was still drowning in medical bills. I wasn't exactly sitting on a pile of savings either. Even if I wanted to help, I couldn't. Then yesterday happened. There was a knock at my door, and I opened it to see my mom standing there, crying. She was begging me to help. Said they were about to be evicted and had nowhere else to go. She said she was sorry. Said they made a mistake. Said she understood if I hated them, but they were desperate. They needed a place to stay, maybe some money too. She was 62, sobbing on my doorstep. Part of me wanted to pull her in and say, it's okay, I'll help. Because she's still my mom, and I do love her. But another part of me was flooded with memories, sitting alone in that hospital, scared to death, knowing they'd chosen table settings and music playlists over being there for me. So I told her I couldn't do it. and I shut the door. I heard her crying out in the hallway. And yeah, it gutted me. But it also felt like, maybe this was the first time she truly understood what I'd gone through. I wasn't going to fix a mess they created while they left me for dead. A little later, Aaron called. Apparently Mom called him too. He told me I should reconsider, that there are parents, they're old, scared, and everyone makes mistakes. He said I needed to be the bigger person. So I told him if he felt that strongly, he could let them move in with him and his pregnant wife. He pushed back. Said that wasn't fair, that his situation was different and he didn't have the space. I said, my situation was different too when I needed heart surgery and they chose a wedding instead. We all have tough decisions to make. Then this morning, Jenna, who I haven't heard from in nearly 2 years, decides to call and unload on me. She was furious. Yelled at me for turning my back on our parents, told me I was selfish, immature, and needed to stop living in the past. I told her if she cared so much, she could send them money. She snapped that it wasn't her responsibility, that they weren't her problem. So I said, then they're not mine either. She hung up after telling me I was a terrible person and that I'd regret this one day. I don't know. I feel angry, sad, guilty, but also, justified? I honestly don't know if I'm being a bad daughter, or if I'm just done being used. Everyone in the family seems to have an opinion, but they all want me to make their lives easier. Here's the truth, I'm not sitting on cash. I'm still digging out of the debt from the surgery they wouldn't help pay for. I live in a cramped studio. My freelance work barely covers bills. I don't have the kind of money they're asking for, and even if I did, I'm not sure I'd give it to them. They had money when I needed help. And they spent it on flowers, plane tickets, and beach wedding nonsense. Does that make me cold? Bitter? Maybe. But I think it makes me human. I think I have every right to be angry. I had to live with the consequences of their choices. Now it's their turn. So tell me, am I wrong for not helping my parents now, after they chose Jenna's dream wedding over my life-saving surgery? First update. So, things have escalated. After I posted this, my phone basically wouldn't stop buzzing. Apparently, my mom took it upon herself to call every relative we have and tell them I was refusing to help and that they were going to be homeless and it was all my fault. Now I've got aunts, uncles, cousins all blowing up my phone with guilt trips. Family helps family, they say. You're being selfish. The usual. But here's what really opened my eyes to how toxic this whole situation has become. My cousin Sylvia, who I've always been close with, called me and said she'd heard about everything and wanted to hear my side. So I told her the whole story. From the diagnosis to the surgery to how my parents picked Jenna's wedding over my survival. I didn't hold anything back. She got quiet. Then she said, I had no idea. I thought your parents paid for your surgery. I asked her what she meant. She said that at Jenna's wedding, my parents were going around telling people how expensive my surgery had been. At Jenna's wedding, while I was buried in medical debt and crashing on a friend's couch, my parents were walking around telling everyone they'd helped pay for my surgery. They claimed it had been a huge financial burden but said they were proud to do it because that's what good parents do. They were collecting sympathy and praise for sacrifices they never made. When Sylvia told me that, I honestly felt sick. It confirmed something I tried not to believe, that they knew they'd failed me. But instead of facing that, they crafted a lie to make themselves look noble. They didn't just abandon me, they used my situation to boost their reputation. I called Aaron and filled him in on what Sylvia told me. He went quiet for a long time. Then he admitted that, yeah, now that I mentioned it, he did remember Mom saying something at the wedding about helping with my surgery. But at the time, his wife was dealing with morning sickness, and they were preparing for the baby, so he wasn't really tuned in. He just assumed they were telling the truth. That's when it hit me like a truck. Not only did my parents prioritize Jenna's wedding over my life, but they also turned around and lied to our entire family, painting themselves as selfless heroes while I was drowning emotionally and financially. And if I wasn't already sure I'd made the right choice by not helping them now, that sealed it. But things didn't stop there. Yesterday, while I was at a coffee shop meeting with a client, presenting logo concepts, trying to look professional, my mom suddenly showed up, crying. She was asking the barista if she knew me, pointing at my table like I was some lost child. My client looked confused and concerned. I had no choice but to excuse myself and go deal with her. She was sitting in a corner booth, looking exhausted and miserable, begging me to talk to her for just 5 minutes. I told my client there was a family emergency and we'd need to reschedule, then took my mom outside to talk. She started apologizing. Said she and Dad had made a horrible mistake. That she finally understood how badly they'd hurt me. That they were sorry, but they were desperate and needed help. She promised they'd pay me back as soon as they got back on their feet. So I asked her about the stories they told at the wedding, how they claimed to have paid for my surgery. She froze, like I just flipped on a spotlight. She said she was embarrassed they couldn't help me and didn't want people to think they were bad parents, so she let people assume they'd helped and the story kind of took on a life of its own. But that's not what Sylvia told me. Sylvia said they were openly telling people they had helped. I confronted her with that. She broke down even harder and admitted she was ashamed. She said she made a mistake. That she just wanted our family to feel proud of them instead of judging them. That she missed me and wanted to make things right. A part of me wanted to believe her. She looked so small, so lost. But then another part of me remembered how easily she lied about something so huge, how she let me be seen as the ungrateful child while she accepted credit for saving my life. I told her I needed time to think. That's when she told me they didn't have time because they were being evicted next week. I said, "That's not my emergency." She got angry. Said I was just like my father, cold, stubborn, unwilling to forgive. Then she walked away. Later that night, Jenna called again. But this time, she wasn't yelling. She was crying. She said she talked to Mom and knew about the lies they told at the wedding. Said she felt awful. That she wanted to help, but she and Barry were having a hard time too. He'd lost his job. They were living with his parents in Ohio, and they had no money to spare. At first, I felt bad for her. She sounded sincere. Then she asked if maybe I could help our parents now, and she'd pay me back later, when things got better for them. That's when I realized, even now, she was still trying to get me to clean up a mess I didn't make. She wanted me to foot the bill while she kept her hands clean. So I told her straight, she got her dream wedding. The one that cost our parents everything. Now she could figure out how to support the people who gave it to her. She said she never asked them to spend that much. I said, yeah, but they did it anyway, and they chose your wedding over my surgery. So now you get to deal with what it means to be the golden child. Then I hung up. I know some people are probably thinking I'm being too harsh. Maybe I am. But I'm tired. Tired of always being the one expected to fix everything when I was the one who got abandoned in the first place. I'm still digging out of the financial hole they left me in. Still in therapy, working through the trauma of nearly dying alone. And now they expect me to just pretend none of that ever happened? No. I'm done. If that makes me the bad guy, then so be it. But at least I'm finally standing up for myself. Second update. This will probably be the last time I post about any of this, because honestly, I'm drained. But I wanted to thank everyone who supported me. The comments, the messages, they helped me realize I'm not crazy for feeling how I feel. So here's what happened. My parents were evicted. Right now, they're staying in the basement of my Uncle Paul's house, Dad's brother. But according to Aaron, it's not going well. Uncle Paul's wife never liked my parents, and she's making it clear this arrangement is short-term. Jenna called one last time too, this time furious. She said it's my fault our parents are basically homeless and living like refugees in a basement. She said I was heartless for letting it happen when I could have stopped it. I told her I didn't tell them to blow $80,000 on a wedding. I didn't force them to gamble their house for one day of photos and champagne. I'm not the reason they're broke. Then she went too far. She said my heart condition wasn't really that serious. That I was overdramatic. That plenty of people live with heart issues, and I didn't need the surgery when I said I did. That's when I knew she still didn't get it. Probably never will. So I told her, if she wants to keep lying to herself, fine. If saying her wedding was more important than my life helps her sleep, then she can go right ahead. But I know the truth. And now, so does everyone else. Then I blocked her. I'm done having the same argument over and over. Aaron, for what it's worth, has stayed mostly neutral. But he told me our parents are working multiple jobs and trying to save for a new apartment. It's not going well, but they're hoping they can get a deposit together soon. He asked me again if I'd consider helping, just a little. Not full support. Just enough to help them move in somewhere. I told him I've already made my decision. I'm not changing my mind. If he wants to help them, great. But stop dragging me into it. He said he gets it, but also thinks I'm holding on to too much anger. That I should let it go, because it's only hurting me now. I told him, some lessons are expensive. And this was one of them. Maybe they should have thought about the cost before making those decisions. He didn't argue after that. But I could tell he still thought I was being stubborn. Maybe I am. But I'm also being consistent. I'm protecting myself from people who already proved they'll abandon me when it counts. The truth is, despite how messy and painful this has been, I feel better. Like, really better. For the first time in years. I stood up for myself. Set real boundaries. And now, I'm not dragging around all this guilt and confusion. Therapy's helped. A lot. My therapist said what my parents did, abandoning me when I was at my most vulnerable, is emotional neglect. and that it's okay to protect myself from people who've hurt me, even if they're family. Even if they say they're sorry. As for my health, I'm doing well. My heart's stable. I go for checkups every 6 months, and my cardiologist says everything looks good. As long as I stay on top of it, I should be able to live a normal life. The medical debt? Almost gone. My credit's slowly recovering. And financially, I'm in a much better place than I was right after the surgery. I've thought a lot about what would have happened if I'd waited like my parents wanted. If I'd postponed the surgery to avoid interfering with Jenna's wedding, I would have died. That's not me being dramatic. That's what my doctors said. So when people tell me my parents didn't really know how serious it was, I remind them that the cardiologist explained it very clearly. My parents just didn't want to hear it because it was inconvenient. And that's not something I can forgive right now. Maybe not ever. I know there are people who think I'm being too cold, that family is family and we should always take care of each other. But I believe family should also be there when you're on the operating table. They weren't. I'm not saying I'll never speak to them again, but I am saying I need space. I need them to understand that what they did has consequences. I'm not going to fake a happy reunion just to ease their guilt. Jenna can keep living in Ohio and pretending her wedding didn't wreck everything. My parents can keep working themselves to the bone trying to undo the damage they caused. And me? I'm going to keep living, keep healing, keep putting myself first, because that's what I learned to do when they didn't. To everyone who read this far, thank you. Truly. Your support helped me realize I'm not alone, and that setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. It makes you strong. This is the end of the story for me. I've got a life to live. And I won't waste another minute trying to fix people who couldn't show up for me when I needed them most. I deserve better. And so does anyone who's ever been left behind by the people who were supposed to love them unconditionally.